Hey, I want to welcome everybody to our MS Views and News first educational program in the state of Massachusetts, and I'm glad that all of you could attend today, and I'm also very glad that we have our online audience because that always means a lot from event to event. So to start off today's program, we are going to be, this is a Compass MS Care program. We are sponsored by EMD Serono, Sandoz, Novartis, Banner, Genentech, Biogen, Bristol-Myers, Squibb, and Sanofi. So I do want to thank them, and I hope you all can thank them as well. Clap, clap, clap. Thank you. All right, we had exhibitors today. We had exhibitors outside greeting the audience coming in of Banner Life Sciences, Alexion, and Bristol-Myers Squibb, and I'm glad that everybody could be here and to give the information that you could, the resources, to those attending this program. Cherie has been doing things for MS Views and News for quite some time. She has been an advisory on our board for quite some time. She's a patient, and she's also the patient healthcare liaison for the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation. She's also a certified MS nurse, and she has been living with multiple sclerosis, as she says, for several decades. It's many decades. Okay, thank you, Cherie, for doing all that you do. Cherie's going to be speaking about traveling with a disability. Thank you very much. Take it away.
Thanks, Stuart. I wasn't going to sort of tell you my story at first, but maybe it'll help to shed some light on some of the tips that I've come up with for traveling with a disability. My first symptoms landed me in the hospital in the fall, right about this time of 1975. But it wasn't until 1994 that I ended up getting my diagnosis of MS after years of what I now know to be relapses and periods of quiet or remission. At the time that I was diagnosed, there was only one drug on the market to treat MS, and it had just come on the market. But because I'd been symptomatic for so long, I didn't qualify for it because it was in a lottery at the time, and it was for younger people who had been newly diagnosed, not for people like me who'd had symptoms for nearly 20 years. By the time I ended up getting on a medication, it was another 7 years after that, I was scooter dependent. I wasn't walking more than about 25 feet independently, and that was with one or two canes or Canadian crutches. So I was really impacted by mobility issues. And I think the real big change came when I moved my care from a local general neurologist who claimed to be an expert in MS care to an MS clinic. I was diagnosed at the Brigham, and the local neurologists that I was seeing questioned whether or not I actually had MS because I was so high functioning. The new multiple sclerosis clinic that I started going to in 2001, 21 years ago, decided even though the drugs that were on the market were for relapsing remitting MS at the time, and I was probably secondary progressive even though I was relapsing actively, that it was right to give me the opportunity to try a medication. Now, 21 years ago, we had 3 drugs on the market, and they were all injectable drugs. They were all for early stage MS. We hadn't really tried them in people that were progressing, but I have to tell you, it slowed the intensity and frequency of my relapses. 2 years later, another drug came on the market. I went on that, and it was like a rescue drug for me. I felt like it was coming up for air, and so I was able to move more, and I was able to prepare food from scratch again, rather than pulling processed, pre-prepared meals from the freezer and microwaving them. Those were huge changes in my life. And with lifestyle changes, I began to recapture my ability to work and to move and to think ahead and to see ahead and to plan ahead. and to live again. So, Paul, I really appreciated your 4 rules for living because they mirror what I've learned myself, really help us. So what I wanted to do, and again, this handout that we've got online for you or with the in-person attendees has my contact information on the top of it. It gives you my email and phone at the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation. And if you have any questions about anything that I'm saying that occurred to you even after we finish this webinar, I encourage you to reach out to me at that email, which is Cherie, Cherie, at msfocus.org. Now, I want you to keep that msfocus.org ready because we're going to be talking about some resources that are there for you to help you manage things with your MS so that you can travel effectively. I don't consider myself to have a disability really anymore. I consider myself to be a healthy, aging professional. And I say that because it wasn't until I was around 50 that I really got put onto a medication and started making major changes in my life. And now I am, after years on disability, I am back at work nearly full time. I am traveling pretty freely, and I'm really living life to its fullest, despite the fact that I still have MS symptoms that are there all the time. They're under the surface. So we do learn to live with these things. They can seem insurmountable when we first find out about the diagnosis. But like Paul said, please don't sell your bikes. Don't give up on your hopes and dreams because they're still very, very accessible. I think COVID has really kept us from entering into a lot of the activities that we enjoy over the last few years. But now that we've found ways to better manage that COVID and keep any infection that we might get milder with our vaccines and now the new bivalent boosters, which do have some efficacy against the current variants, I would highly recommend that before you undertake any travel, you do get those boosters and vaccines. They do not make your MS worse. Although most of us, when we do have an immune response to the vaccine, which is generally for the first 2 or 3 days after the injections, our MS symptoms are very likely going to come to the surface and really seem more prominent. And that's because our body temperature is going up a little bit in response to the immune response that's being mounted in our bodies. That's good. That's expected. That when you have that response, you should be rejoicing, not being scared about it. Certainly take your Tylenol or your ibuprofen to manage that fever and to manage some of those symptoms, but it should not negatively impact your MS. It shouldn't develop more lesions in your brain or anything like that. So please do get vaxxed and boosted. One other thing I want to, before I start talking about the travel, is to mention that those of us who are on a class of medication known as B-cell depletion meds or anti-CD20 meds, and they're the meds like Ocrevus or Kesimpta or Rituxan. These drugs work very specifically to minimize the B cells in our bodies, which are the cells that are thought to attack our central nervous system and cause the damage in that central nervous system, cause the lesions in our MRIs. Those cells are depleted or minimized. One of the other functions of those cells is to mount a response to an infection to give us antibodies, or to a vaccine to give us antibodies. So those of us that are on those medications may not develop as robust a response to any vaccine that we get, whether it's COVID or flu or shingles or Pneumovax, any of the pneumonia vaccines, we just may not mount that strong a response. That doesn't mean we shouldn't get them. We need all the help we can get to manage these things. So please do get those. The fact that we do not mount that strong a response means that we still need to mask when we're in crowds. We still need to mask when we're indoor settings around people that are not part of our household. We still need to mask when we're on airplanes or trains with other people or going to a concert or whatever we're doing. That's just another layer of protection for us to keep us healthy, to keep us moving, to keep us active. So one of the big things about traveling with a disability, particularly MS, is that we need to learn to manage our fatigue. Over the years, I've found really helpful ways to manage fatigue. And believe it or not, good hydration is one of the key ways to manage that fatigue. Now, you may be saying, oh, but I can't hydrate because I have an irritable bladder. And the more I hydrate, the more I'm going to be in the bathroom, the less I'm going to be able to travel, sightsee, experience life. I'd like to refer you to that www.msfocus.org. Go to our publications and go to our winter 2017 issue of the MS Focus magazine in publications. That magazine is entirely devoted to ways to manage fatigue. I find that schedule is very helpful. Lifestyle changes such as exercise and dietary changes are very helpful. Exercise really is probably one of the most effective ways to manage fatigue because it helps us to overcome any deconditioning that we're living with while having our downtime, while recovering from a relapse, or while being less active than we were before. Think about it. If you've ever tried to lift weights, your arm gets really tired if you're not used to doing that. The more you do it, the less tired it is. And it's the same way with our bodies. The more we move them, the less fatiguing that movement becomes. So look at that winter 2017 issue of the MS Focus magazine and incorporate some of those tips into your life. Keep your schedule as close to what it is while you're at home as possible. I find that if I have to go from the East Coast to the West Coast, 3-hour time difference, and it's just for a 1 or 2 day conference, I keep my watch set at my regular time, meaning that I eat at the regular time, I go to bed at the regular time, and I get up at the regular time. Sometimes those early morning meetings at the West Coast would have me getting up for a 6 o'clock meeting instead of a 9 o'clock meeting, but do as much as you can to keep your schedule where it had been while you're traveling. That will help to keep fatigue as low as possible. Also, I would recommend that if you keep foods and portions of food similar to what you're used to eating at home, that tends to actually keep you on track and keep your fatigue down while you're traveling. Granted, while you're traveling, you're going to want to sample new foods. I will tell you, though, that foods that are high in sugar content are going to increase your fatigue. So try to keep those at a minimum. Hydration is, as I said, really essential. And I don't mean just sipping throughout the day to keep hydrated. I suggest to those of you who have some bladder issues that you hydrate in large amounts so that half an hour before you get ready to take off for the day, drink a whole glass of water. That will then go through. You'll be able to hit the bathroom just before you walk out the door and empty out. And it will minimize the dribbling or the trickling or the incontinence if you can do all in one lump sum and then get it down and move on. msfocus.org has probably a dozen articles on bladder management, so you can put those into effect while you're traveling as well. Protect yourself and your health. I've already talked to you about masking while you're around others, particularly now that you're into the winter season where you've got flu and RSV present. Do that protection. Plan ahead when you're traveling. Spontaneity, although it can be fun and exciting, when you're dealing with a chronic illness, can actually have some barriers. You don't want the excitement of no room at the inn to hit you. So if you're traveling and trying to find lodging just because you know you're getting really tired, it's really better to plan ahead with your lodging, with how much you're going to travel in a day, and get that all set. Now, if you're traveling out of the country, out of the U.S., another thing that you want to do when you're planning ahead is to plan for outlet adapters. If you've got a scooter or a wheelchair that you're traveling with, you're going to want an outlet adapter that's suitable for the country that you're traveling in. So do a little research ahead of time. Travel with those adapters in your carry-ons. If you're traveling with a chair or a scooter and you're going by plane, check with the airlines to make sure that the flights that you're wanting to take are not small commuter jets that can't handle a full-size scooter or wheelchair. The cargo holds often can't take the width, the height, or the weight of some of those. So it may mean working with the airlines, talking to someone on the phone instead of booking it yourself. And that may be an extra $20, $25 service fee on your ticket for doing that. But believe me, it's worth it. That means that your scooter or your chair is going to arrive in time for you to get there. Because travel schedules can go awry, it's always a good idea to make sure that you have a snack or extra fluid packed with you and on you. You can't take liquid through TSA pre-check, so as soon as you get through that pre-check, fill your water bottle so that you've got that handy, and pack an apple or an orange or some grapes or even a protein bar in your luggage, so that if you do get held up, if you're delayed with anything, you have the fuel and the liquid that you need with you. Carry a small bag for emergency repairs with your scooter or your wheelchair. This should include something like replacement screws, a variety of replacement screws, a screwdriver, or a small wrench in a Ziploc bag. I recommend a roll of duct tape and some bubble wrap. I wish that I had seen these tips before I really started traveling with my scooter. I used to travel with a 180-pound three-wheel full-size scooter, and it almost inevitably had some damage when it came through traveling. So things that I found that minimize the damage are, if you're traveling with a wheelchair, take your headrest off and secure it with some duct tape to the seat so that it's not getting torn or bent. Tip the seat down if possible, or lower the seat so that it doesn't take up as much room. Bubble wrap and duct tape your joystick so that it doesn't get damaged. If you've got a scooter that you're traveling with, disengage the tiller on the scooter and tip it down into the seat of your scooter, and then tip the back of your scooter seat down on top of that tiller. Bubble wrap it and duct tape it so that all of that stuff that's important for the operation is protected. Disengage your wheels on both the scooter and on the wheelchair so that it rolls freely. Turn off the ignition, and take your key with you so that airport employees are not tempted to drive it where they need to and damage it. that it will roll freely and get on the plane. Now, another thing that seems to streamline the process is when you get to the airport, actually go to the airline's ticketing booth and enlist the help of somebody to help you get to your gate and check your scooter where you would check your baggage, check your scooter or your wheelchair there. So it can be put onto the plane right away and not miss getting on. So that it goes with your luggage onto the plane and they both get to the site with you. You then have somebody getting you to your gate in a wheelchair. You have somebody getting you through TSA pre-check and working with you where that's concerned, assisting you. Let's see. Make sure that your power cord and any adapter that you might need is in the back seat back pocket, along with the manual for your wheelchair, so that if there is a problem and you need to use that repair kit, you've got the manual handy. Now, I have not had any trips where I've taken my scooter with me where there's been any damage shy of maybe a tiny scratch in the paint since I started doing these things. Another thing I want you to do while you're traveling, if you're in a scooter or wheelchair, is to really be aware of your surroundings. It's such a temptation when you're traveling, particularly now that we have such great cameras on our cell phones, to be able to do a little travel video. So we put into video mode and we just either walk on looking at what we're filming, or we wheel on looking at what we're filming. And that is an absolute recipe for disaster. You need to watch where you're going. I mean, yes, you can look at that while you're filming, or you can film while you're walking or while you're rolling ahead, but look not at the camera, but at where you're going. I have seen all too many of these films from friends of mine who are traveling in their chairs, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, 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 and all of a sudden we're looking at the sky because they've hit a root in the path and dumped their chair, or they have hit a small stone and tipped the scooter. The three-wheel scooters are not as stable as the four-wheel scooters are. Particularly those travel scooters that are lightweight and disassemble are real prone to tipping over and injury. So you've got to look where you're going with them. Pack the supplies that you need in your carry-on. Your medicines, your catheters, any injections, your CPAP machine, none of those should be going in your luggage. So carry them in your carry-on. If you have any medications that are liquid and larger than the 4-ounce travel-on, be sure you get a note from your doctor stating that this is a necessity, and TSA will accept that as long as it's on a doctor's letterhead or prescription pad. So you also might want to put a rapid test kit or two into your carry-on in the event that you start getting symptoms of a cold while you're traveling, or just to make sure that you don't have COVID and aren't spreading it to people. If you're traveling to warmer climates, particularly with a cooling vest, I would pack your cooling inserts and vest in your regular luggage. I frequently, if we're going on a cruise to southern climes that are a little warmer, will pack my cooling vest inserts in my regular luggage. Inserts for one vest generally fit very nicely into a 12-pack cooler size insulated cooler. So they'll fit very nicely into most luggage. I usually pack them first or last thing before we head for the airport, so they're solidly frozen. And then when we get to our destination, get them back into a freezer. Now, some of you may be using evaporative cooling equipment, so this doesn't apply to you, the cooling equipment that you soak in water and then it keeps you cool. I will say that those don't work as well in some of the more humid, warmer climates, like if you're traveling to the Bahamas or into the Caribbean, any place like that that gets really warm. The evaporative cooling doesn't work as well because it's too humid. There's too much water in the air for it to really work well. There's a phase change cooling insert that some of the cooling companies give out, and that actually doesn't freeze. The cooling inserts get cool and hard at about 50 degrees, so just immersing them in cold water or putting them in a refrigerator, which is helpful because it means you don't need to have a freezer available for them. So another thing that I strongly recommend for everybody who's traveling with a disability, particularly now that we still have COVID as endemic, even if it's not pandemic in areas that you're traveling to, is that wherever you go, whether you're flying or whether you're booking a tour with somebody or going on a cruise, that you take out travel insurance that has a medical component with it. Your medical insurance, particularly if you have an HMO, may not cover medical expenses outside of your particular network. So you want to be sure that you're taking out insurance to cover for any accidents, illnesses, or injuries that you have while you're traveling that has a medical component. My family and I just got back from Alaska in early August from a trip that had been postponed at the beginning of the pandemic. I actually contracted COVID on that trip, even though I'd had 4 doses of Moderna. And I was masking everywhere except in the dining room on board the ship when our meals had been served, and I still got COVID because the majority of people were not masking in the dining room. The beauty about that, and I didn't know this, and it was a totally unexpected gift, is when I got home, the cruise line contacted me, and even though they'd given me several perks while on board because I had to be isolated for 2 full days in my room, and my husband did too, they actually refunded a significant portion of our cruise cost because they had done everything that they knew to do to keep travelers safe. But as I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, we really need to be very careful, those of us that are on these B-cell depletion or anti-CD20 medications. The vaccines and the masks are not 100% protection, so we need to be very diligent about those things. There are a number of travel companies that deal with travelers with disabilities. They cater to people that are in wheelchairs or in scooters. And I have listed some links on the handout that we've got for you online. And just look at that, click onto your icon on your page for handouts, or feel free if you're unable to get it and really read it well or copy it, certainly send me an email, Cherie at msfocus.org, and I will email it back to you. These tour companies are also, if they're dealing with people in chairs or scooters, they realize that they can't cram a ton of stuff into one day because of fatigue issues. So they may be a little easier on you than going with a regular tour group, even if you're not in a chair or scooter. If you have issues with fatigue, you might want to go with these disability experts that are tour guides to book your tours. Let's see. If traveling outside the USA, you might want to contact the U.S. State Department. That is a link on the handout that I've given it to you. They can tell you if there are, in the areas that you're planning to go to, whether or not you've made arrangements already. They can tell you if there are any alerts out there, political unrest, pandemics, if you're going to areas where Ebola or RSV or COVID are still pretty prominent. You might want to put them off for right now. Also, by contacting the U.S. State Department with your international travel plans and the members of your party, if there is any unrest while you're traveling, they then have an alert to check on you and your party. Back in the summer of 2005, when the subway was bombed in London, my husband and I were in England, and that was the day we were planning to go to London. I don't know why, but something told us that Chesil Beach and the south coast of England was just so beautiful. We wanted to take an extra day and maybe postpone our trip to London. When we got back to our B&B, there were 15 calls on the answering machine at the B&B, including one from the U.S. State Department, checking to see if we had been in London and they need to continue looking for us. So that is a helpful thing to tick that in. If you're doing a cruise, cruises are wonderful for those of you who are traveling with wheelchairs or scooters because everything is accessible. Everything is on one level. Be sure to book an accessible stateroom because a full-size chair or a full-size scooter doesn't fit through the door of your stateroom. The doors to the accessible cabins are a little bit wider. They're actually more square footage, so you've got greater room around the ends of the beds. There isn't a step up into the bathroom. It's a roll-in bath with a tip-down shower seat and a handheld shower rather than just one in the ceiling. So they are very limited on cruise lines, so it's best to book your cruise as far in advance as you can and see what's available. You may even need to consider changing your itinerary or even changing your cruise lines. Many of the cruise lines honor your loyalty membership from one cruise line to another. So don't stay specifically with one cruise line. If you do have accessibility needs, move throughout them, and they do honor. If you have chronic or repeated problems like frequent urinary tract infections and you're going to be away for several weeks, you might want to talk to your doctor about giving you a medication that you can hop on that. You may not have access to the diagnostic techniques or prescription services that you might hear at home in the U.S. have when you're traveling abroad. I was in India for 4 weeks in 2008 and developed a UTI, and we didn't know that that's what it was, but it really put a damper on my trip for about 3 weeks of that time that I was there. Add that to the 90+ degree heat while I was there, and it was not a pleasant trip abroad. So really take some time to learn about the sites that you're going to and things that you may need to deal with while you're at those sites. I think I've sort of touched on key points for traveling with a disability. Again, I would strongly recommend that you really look at traveling with a tour group. If you're traveling independently and you do have a scooter or a wheelchair, so you need a van with a lift, you might want to check with your auto insurance company before you leave home to see if you can get a waiver to go on to that policy. I can tell you from experience that if you rent a car outside of the U.S., that the insurance for 1 week in the car is as big as your premium is for a year here in the U.S. So getting a waiver in advance, which we didn't think to do, can be very helpful when you do that. And I think at this point, I will be happy to open to questions. And if there are no questions, I can tell you about a couple of the places that we've been that are that cater to people who maybe have a disability. So are there any questions in the chat right now?
The chat right now. There are no questions in the chat right now. I just asked everybody on chat if they have questions, but does anybody in the audience have a question? Okay, great.
All right, let me just tell you that while we were in England, that time when the subway bombing took place, we opted, because of that bombing, not to go into London, but to see sites in the rural areas of Dorset and Cornwall in England. We made it over to Stonehenge and Salisbury Cathedral. Salisbury Cathedral was accessible, but I found that most of the other places that we went to in rural England were not. They didn't have elevators. They didn't have curb cuts or ramps. We went to a delightful Ford Abbey in Dorset. Gorgeous, gorgeous place that used to be minor royals manor, and actually had its own chapel built into the house. Wonderfully manicured grounds. You could get around the grounds in a chair or scooter. You really couldn't get into the buildings because there were no elevators or ramps into the buildings. Iceland, however, was a whole different ball of wax. We bought city passes in Iceland, very nominal cost, something like $30 or $40 for a 3 or 4 day city pass that let us get on and off every single city bus, gave us discounts in the shops, gave us free admission to multiple museums. So we learned a lot about Norse and Viking history, Icelandic history, some of the early settlers to the island. All of the buildings that we went into had ramped entryways. Even the little boutique shops in town were easily accessible. There is a link on the handout that I gave you to tour guides that do accessible Iceland. So, and I have talked to people that have gone on those tours, and they say that they're absolutely phenomenal. I can tell you the scenery is breathtaking. You feel like you've been transported to a whole different world. It's not a commercialized place. I will tell you, though, that the food in Iceland is probably double the cost of the food here in the U.S. to eat out. What was not double the cost was like beer and wine. They were the same cost you'd expect to pay here, but a hamburger or a bowl of soup runs you $20, $25. Right. So again, are there any questions from?
Yes. Cherie, can you hear me? We have some people in the audience that have questions.
Okay.
Hi, Cherie, it's Jill.
Hi, Jill.
I have a question for you. Do you think if you're planning a large European trip, it's worthwhile to go with a travel agency that specializes in travel for disabilities?
I do. And again, it's not just if you're in a scooter or a wheelchair. If you've got fatigue issues, if you need a little bit of flexibility in your schedule, I would certainly go with a tour group. My husband's one of those that likes spontaneity, and he loves to rent a car, but we've gotten sidetracked a couple of times because of not knowing the territory, and a tour guide can really help you with that. So my preference is just having made mistakes and learned from them, that it can be very, very helpful to enlist the help of a tour guide who knows something about energy conservation, time management, and dealing with equipment.
All right. I have questions from those online, all right? Let me get this off. All right, first one is, I missed the place where you said how to get insurance waiver and how and what it would cover.
Okay, the insurance waiver I was talking about was for automobile insurance. If you're going to rent a car outside of the United States, then I would recommend contacting your automobile insurance company, letting them know where you're going, that you're planning on renting a car, and asking them if your auto insurance could be transferable to the vehicle that you're renting in England, as we did, or in whatever other country you're going to. The waiver, the insurance that we paid for in England for our 10 days there cost us over $800 just for that 10 days. And we had no problems as far as even a scratch on the car. So we didn't think of that in advance. So that's a real helpful thing to do, and will save you some money.
Thank you. Another person is asking if they're traveling on a cruise line and they're fully mobile but traveling with another person, should they still inform the cruise line that they have MS?
No, if you're fully mobile, there's no need to disclose that at all. You just enjoy to the fullest extent that you choose to.
Great, thank you. Anybody else in the audience have a question? If not, I have one for you, and that is, well, it's not really a question. It's about TSA. So, as you know, I travel a lot, and TSA is truly different from location to location. And although they say that there's one protocol, there really isn't. And that includes those that are traveling with disability as well. So sometimes I see people going through with a wheelchair, and they're demanded to get up out of their wheelchair, even though they have a hard time getting up, just so they can pat down the seat and et cetera. What kind of advice do you have for people where they're informed to do something where they really physically know that they cannot, and they're dealing with the U.S. government, and if they say something too much, it may wind up that they're not on their travel plans?
There are cards available that you can carry in your wallet that state that you have multiple sclerosis and your mobility is limited and need to use a chair or a scooter. If you present that to TSA, they need to honor that. The other thing, and I do believe, Stu, you have some of those cards, don't you?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. If you're on a disease-modifying therapy, the patient support call center for your disease-modifying therapy also has those cards. Your doctor can write on a prescription pad that you are not mobile, you are not ambulatory, and therefore you need to go through a facilitated screening. They will take you to a private area and wand you at that point. So TSA, yes, it will change from place to place. One of the things that I found very helpful, because prior to the pandemic, I was also doing an awful lot of traveling, and it really is worth, as far as I'm concerned, the $85 to get 5 years worth of TSA pre-check. That does require you to be fingerprinted and have a BCI check, criminal background check. But it lets you sideline the main screening station. And I find that with the TSA pre-check, it's just a matter of going through generally not the scanner, the full body scanner, but just through the regular metal detector scanner. And they will wand you if you set off anything. You don't have to take your shoes off. You don't have to take your jacket off or your belt off if you're TSA pre-check. So it makes things a little easier. It facilitates that. And if you know you're going to be traveling a lot, if it's just one trip or two, it probably isn't worth it. But if you know you're going to be traveling a lot, then I would make that investment and get that TSA pre-check to facilitate travel.
So a person is asking how they get the card. but what they really need to do is go through the process. So you may want to let them know about this.
So the TSA PreCheck card or the card that says you've got a disability?
I don't know what she's asking.
All right, for the card that says you've got a disability, you check with your drug company. They can send it to you in the mail. You check with MS Views and News. You can get a card at any of their functions or through the mail. Or you can ask your doctor to write a note for you that you can carry with you.
Shh, we didn't bring any with us today. We didn't bring any with us today, so don't come asking me for one.
Sorry.
We might have a few of them left over somewhere, all right? But you could come see us afterwards. All right, next question. I use a small walker. Do I need an accessible room?
No.
Okay. One thing I want to let you all know about before you go any forward, and that is that anybody that rides a mobility scooter, you can actually take your scooter to the door of a plane if you're traveling by air, all right? You get what's called a pink tag, where that's from Delta, but other airlines use other tags, all right, where they tag your mobility scooter and they bring it down to the belly of the plane after you get off the scooter and onto the plane, which you can have assistance to do that as well. But then it's brought up to you after the plane lands. It's not like it goes to luggage or to the to where your baggage is coming out, but instead it comes right up to you to the door of the plane, and you can get back on your scooter and take it to baggage claim or wherever else you have to go. Okay? I just wanted to add that into what you were saying. All right, let me just see if there's any other questions real quick. Carol's asking, have you traveled on, well, we already did that about the Disney cruise. I'm going to skip over that. Charlene's asking, the benefits for some credit card companies is they will reimburse you of the TSA costs.
Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you.
I haven't heard that either. I haven't heard about that with Clear. So if you're with Clear, you know, that where they fingerprint you to get on the plane, that you can get reimbursed if you have certain higher-end credit cards. So
I just want to remind you that there are lots of tips on managing your symptoms at msfocus.org. Go to the magazine section and type in the symptom you're looking to have help managing. Keeping those symptoms managed is really key to traveling well when you've got a chronic illness.
okay.
No, I was just going to say MX does the TSA. MX, American Express.
American Express.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Along with their priority pass.
Okay. Thank you. All right, anybody else? If not, let's thank Cherie for being with us today. Thank you, Cherie.
Okay, thanks.
So again, I want to thank everybody for coming here today and for all those online as well. This is a Compass to MS Care program. We do this around the United States. If anybody wants to know, you can follow us by visiting our website and seeing all the locations that we are every month. Okay, this Compass to MS Care series was designed to bring MS education and resources to those in rural and underserved communities around the United States. So again, I want to thank you all for coming here. Everybody's in attendance today, and for all those online, thank you, and we'll see you again soon. Have a great day.